Hey, everybody, welcome into the podcast. We are back with another special bonus episode.
Bonus episode.
Brad, it always feels good to do these interviews, and today we've got a pretty special one lined up. We are talking with John Little from Smooth Ambler, and this is getting lined up in a very fortuitous way with our interests, Brad, because we have just sat down to pick a barrel of Smooth Ambler Old Scout. So, I mean, what better time to talk with the CEO of Smooth Ambler?
I was going to say, we had an absolute blast. We were up at Western Reserve Distillery. We were doing our Smooth Ambler pick with our friend of show, Scott Sauer. It was an absolutely phenomenal time. And it was, quite honestly made better for the fact that we were drinking Smooth Ambler. So, John, it is wonderful to have you on the show. Welcome in.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk about myself.
We're excited to talk about you too. So why don't we start out today with a little bit of the history of the brand of Smooth Ambler. This is a whiskey, and a brand that I see on the shelves all the time, but I don't know if a lot of people who are just passing by it at the liquor store would know, even geographically, where the distillery is located. And it was something that was really interesting to me to find out, because you're in an area of the country, John, where there's not really a lot of distilleries popping up. So can you tell us a little bit about where Smooth Ambler is located, why you decided to start it where you did, how long have you been in business? Just give us the rundown of the business.
Yeah, sure. We're located in a little town called Maxwellton, which is in Greenbrier County, West Virginia. So lots of folks have probably heard of the Greenbrier Hotel. We're about 10 or 15 minutes from the Greenbrier Hotel. We're in the southeastern part of West Virginia. That's a mouthful. Southeastern part of West Virginia. And we live kind of in the middle of nowhere, but we live in an area that we think is beautiful and has really wonderful people and has the clean water and clean air and natural resources and the temperature fluctuations that we think makes really great whiskey. We opened our doors had the idea in 2008, formed the business in 2009, opened our doors in 2010. So we celebrated our 10-year anniversary at the beginning of the pandemic. It was April 7th of 2020. And the way the business came to be, it was an idea created by my father-in-law and by me. And the idea was to make something in West Virginia that could be world-class, and then we could distribute it across the world, and that we could showcase what we thought was so wonderful about West Virginia. And that was really the simple idea that started us down the path.
Yeah.
Yeah, John, and thinking about, the beauty of West Virginia, it really makes me think about the opportunity that you guys have to bring in just such a beautiful local flavor into what you're doing. So talk to me about your lineup. Like, what all are you guys putting out? And from what I understood, you guys have slowly made that transition from sourced product into your own distillate. So how has that been for you guys?
Well, we still source a lot of whiskey. When we started off the business, we made vodka and gin, and then we made whiskey whenever we had time, whenever we had capacity. And we were really tiny when we started. In 2011, we started sourcing whiskey, right? People do it differently now. They start sourcing whiskey, and if the brand is successful, they build a distillery. We went the opposite way. We built a distillery first, started making vodka and gin, and then started sourcing whiskey, right? We kind of went the opposite way because we really didn't know what we were doing when we started. And so over the years, Old Scout, that was Old Scout. It's been a couple of different things. It's been Old Scout Bourbon, Old Scout Rye, and Old Scout 10, and Very Old Scout. And so that over the years, that growth of that brand enabled us to start to grow our own whiskey production. So we started making whiskey. We spent the last 10 or 11 years making whiskey. And now we're starting to get into meaningful amounts of our own house-produced whiskey that's of age that we're happy to have. So we have the whiskey that we made in-house, and we have the source whiskey and Old Scout, and then we have the blend of those two very different efforts, which is contradiction. So we have quite a few SKUs in each lineup, but we think about our business in three ways: the stuff we make, the stuff we source, and the marriage of those two.
Yeah, and there's not a lot of people out there that are kind of functioning in all three of those realms at the same time. I'm really fascinated at how well you guys are doing all three of those things. And I guess if I had to ask a follow-up question, it would kind of be like, which of those three came with the biggest learning curve, or which was the most difficult for you to kind of wrap your arms around in the beginning? The sourcing and choosing the right barrels? Was it making your own distillate, or is it the kind of art of blending?
I think it would be unwise of me to say to say anything other than it's absolutely true. To making your own whiskey is the most difficult thing. There's a reason these heritage distilleries have been here for so long, and the miracle is not that they make so much, but it's that they make so much and it's so delicious. And so making your own whiskey has absolutely been the hardest part of that. There's been a lot of trial and error with. We tried the small barrel thing early on. We tried pot stills early on. Over the years, we switched to standard 53-gallon barrels, and then we went to a continuous column. We still run a continuous column. I wouldn't go back to pots. We've changed yeast. We've changed how we cook. We've changed so much over the years, which I have a really great story about one of the experiments that we ran about 4 years ago. But we've changed so much over the years to improve our whiskey. So it's for sure been the hardest part. And anytime like Old Scout has won an award, we've always tried to make sure that we were very upfront and honest that, MGP did the heavy lifting on those barrels. We think we did a really good job of selecting them and then of treating them. We call that the shepherding process of shepherding those barrels along the way and making sure that they were treated well and that we selected the right ones and that we filtered them the right way and that we diluted them if they weren't cask strength, that we treated them the right way. So certainly distilling is the hardest part.
Man, John, I know you're in the Bible Belt, but shepherding the whiskey, we're getting biblical here. I absolutely love it. I love the process you're describing, because I think that anyone who really dives deep into the whiskey world will recognize that it is such an art form. Like the craft of making whiskey is not a science. Like there are so many different factors that go into it and so many different ways it can turn out. Literally just before we started recording, we were talking about how, sister barrels, a barrel sitting right next to one another at the warehouse could turn out vastly different. So I guess for you as, the master distiller over there, what do you find the most rewarding in the process of like, man, we got that right, and I know it's because of this or that? Like what do you find most interesting about the process of making whiskey?
That's a giant question. I find so much of it fascinating. I think at the end of the day, if the final product is really the only thing that most people think about. There are so many things that I think about being successful for our community and being successful in business, and so many of those things that matter from a personal side. But what you're judged on is the output of the whiskey. So ultimately, I'm most excited when I taste something. The moment that I always get really, really excited about is when I taste something in a barrel that's not ready yet, right? That it's maybe 3 years old, and we know we're going to release it at 5 or 6 years old, but we taste it at 3 or 4 years old, and it's going to be amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And you say, man, we know we got that right. And I can remember the first time it ever happened with our homemade juice is I was in a rick house, drilled a barrel, let it sit for like a second, smelled it and sipped it, and the hair on the back of my neck stood up. And I was like, man, we made this whiskey and it's going to be a home run. And those are the things that I get really, really excited about.
Yeah.
I love sourcing whiskey and I love blending whiskey, but if you know how hard it is to make your own whiskey and to get to a point where you've taken so much care from everything from procuring the grains all the way through maturation, and you drill a barrel and you taste it, that to me is the kind of the ultimate goal of the business that we're in. And that for us, it's for me, I still want to win. I want to win one of those world awards, the world's best whiskey or something similar to that, with our own house produced whiskey.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's the fruit of your labors. It has to give you a sense of pride to be able to pull something off the still or, like you said, at 3 years old and know that by the time it's 5 years old, it's going to be really, really stellar. I can't imagine what that feeling must be like.
Yeah, it's pretty tremendous. Anything you make, most anything people make or do in their lives, they pretty much know whether they're being successful pretty close to after it's done. If a chef prepares a meal, they get instant feedback. If you make beer, and you know that beer is delicious. You pretty much at the time it goes into the can. You build a house, or you're a nurse. You feel like you know that you've done good at the end of the day. Sometimes in distilling, you don't know if you've done good at the end of the day. You followed, like you say, so much of it is a science, and we try to really get down to the science, and so much of it is an art, right? There are so many variables about yeast and about climate and water and the barrels that we've talked about a couple of times. There's so many variables that you really can't control. You can do your best to limit the peaks and valleys of that, but sometimes you just don't know at the beginning when you put the whiskey in the barrel. Is it good enough? Have you done your job enough? But you've got to wait for a couple of years. You got to wait for 3 years or 4 years or 5 years. At least as a new business, that's what you have to do, because you don't have years of data that say this is what that whiskey tastes like the moment it goes into a barrel, and this is the analysis off of a gas chromatograph that says these are all of the products that we need in the whiskey. So that part is extremely hard, and when you get it right, and we're getting it right a lot more now than we did 5 years ago and 7 years ago and certainly 10 years ago, it's really a special moment.
Well, and in addition to, in your words, shepherding the barrels, you've also been shepherding this business along as it has grown, as it's expanded. And my question about the business itself is like, you guys, you were founded in 2009, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So like you are right on the cusp of the bourbon and American whiskey boom that we've been having over the last decade plus now. And, Brad and I always compare things when we're talking about like cultural moments by measuring like what was on TV or what was in movie theaters. And, we were big fans of the show How I Met Your Mother, and that came out in 2005 and featured whiskey very heavily throughout that show. And, Mad Men started on TV in 2007. And I think people underestimate how much Don Draper drinking Canadian Club like boosted whiskey sales when people started watching that show. How much have you seen the market change and permeate and mutate over this last decade? And what's it been like to kind of, I don't know, surf those waves as you've figured out how to get the business up and going?
Well, certainly it's a very different world in all parts of the business from the time that we started to the time that the time that we're currently in. And luckily we were able to ride the coattails of that market. I certainly think that having whiskey in whatever, in more pop culture, lots of more press about it. The cocktail movement has really changed and really gotten whiskey centric, and that's changed the business a lot. And just watching the whiskey market change itself. I remember walking into a store in 2011 when we first brought out Old Scout, and I had couple of different Old Scouts. We had Old Scout bourbon and Old Scout rye, and then we had the vodka that we made and the gin that we made. And nobody even wanted to talk about vodka or gin because there were so many craft folks doing that already. So we were selling both the bourbon and the rye the moment we walked in the door. I'll take it, because there just wasn't bourbon. Now you look at the shelf and there's, I don't even know how many brands are on the shelf, and there's hundreds,
right? Several
hundreds.
Right.
And so certainly we've been really, really fortunate that the business has grown at the same time that our business is, was starting up. And we also think that we've worked really, really hard to make sure that we provided the customers with what they wanted to drink during that time. So I think it's, like everybody says, is it luck or is it hard work? It's a lot of both.
Yeah. And honestly, luckily for our podcast, there's that many brands, because when you try a different whiskey every week, you move through quite a few brands. But for the average, consumer out there, what is it that sets Smooth Ambler apart? What is it that you feel like your whiskey offers that would make somebody go, I need to try that Smooth Ambler?
I think we offer a couple of different things. One of the things that we started off doing, which now in hindsight, the way the market's changed, we always tried to be really affordable. Seems like now people start off brands and it's a luxury. We didn't want to be that. We wanted to be affordable for everybody. And we've sold a lot of barrels that were lot of whiskey that was really too cheap for what it was over the years, and made that mistake. But we wanted to be affordable. We wanted to be always to be unique. We think we bring out things that aren't exactly the same as what other people do. And so whether you're talking about the first person to bring a high rye bourbon really to market with Old Scout, it was 36% rye. And so that was new when we first brought that out. And then one of the things that we do is we always bottle things at higher proofs. We don't chill filter. And because of that, and because we want cocktails or the whiskey to stand up in a cocktail, we always bottle at high proof. So the lowest thing that we bottle is 92 proof, but most of our stuff is, 105 proof or cask strength if it's not 90, 99 or 92. So I think a couple of those things: affordable, high proof. We're honest and transparent about it, and I think we're unique.
And at the very least, we have drank your stuff. I think we had Contradiction about a year ago. We've now done a barrel pick with you guys. I can vouch it's damn good whiskey.
Wonderful. We love hearing that. Ultimately, that's the most important thing, right? Is that when you drink that whiskey, that it's enjoyable to you. What else can we ask for at the end of the day?
All right, John, we're going to let you get off the hot seat here a little bit. We're going to transition to the other part of this episode, which is talking about your favorite movie. This is the part that I always look forward to because, it gives people like you a chance to not have to do your elevator pitch and not hit the same talking points all the time. And man, oh man, if I had to take a guess as to what you were going to pick before we hit record, I don't think in a million years I would have picked this movie. But I'm excited to talk about it, John. So can you reveal to our listeners, what's your favorite film?
Yeah, it seems really simple, and it's certainly not a masterpiece, but I think my favorite movie is probably Friday.
It's so good, man. First of all, I think that sometimes I get stuck in like the snooty film guy role where we don't talk about comedies enough on this show. And the movies that you come back to, we find time and time again, it's either the ones that had some sort of really sentimental attachment, or it's the ones that make you laugh. Like I've watched Anchorman 50 times because it just never ceases to make me giggle like a small child. And I'm sure Friday has that same effect for you.
It does. So much of our lives seem like they're stressful. And I love being in a moment where I'm really not thinking about anything. I love that moment of just completely zoning out, laughing at a movie, and taking your mind off of how hard work is or what's going on in the world. So certainly comedies are my area.
Right before we hit record, we were just talking about 90s movies in general. And I think there's something about movies in the 90s that they understood the assignment, and as far as escapism goes. Like I'm not going to give away any spoilers or anything, but I just went to see the new Batman movie last night. And Brad, this is something that you and I have been talking about for months and months on this show. I'm just kind of over the gloom and doom of every big movie lately. Like the late 90s, if you wanted to go see an action movie, you went to see Independence Day. If you wanted to see a James Bond movie, it was the goofiest James Bond movie ever made. And like, I'm kind of ready to get back to fun, goofy movies again. And so when you talk about Friday, it's like there is nothing more laid back and just goofy than Friday.
Yeah, absolutely. I love how pretty much every scene's got a funny line in it. I think I've said a bunch of those lines, hundreds and hundreds of times with my friends, and it feels like I'm reliving that movie every single time that I'm hanging out with my friends. So it's been whatever that's been, 30. I don't even know when it was made. It's got to be like 27 years old. Is it like a 92, 95 movie?
Yeah, I think it's 95. And it's so funny. We haven't done that movie on the show yet. Brad, I know we've done Straight Outta Compton. So we've talked about Ice Cube, but we've never done the movie that he wrote, which is Friday.
Now I have to ask, if you ever listen to the podcast, you might find out that I have not seen quite as many movies as Bob has. I will say one of my favorite things to hear people do is describe the plots of comedies. Because when you really sit down and describe something like an Anchorman or the Hangover or something along those lines, the actual plots are ridiculous. So for somebody who hasn't seen Friday, John, what is just the bare bones 60 seconds basic plot of Friday?
Wait a minute. I thought you guys were taking me off the hot seat. Let's see. You know, I got to think about that.
It's harder than it sounds, isn't it? I mean, what?
Oh my gosh. So that's so hard to describe. Let's see here. It is about a couple of guys who spend a day partaking in the devil's lettuce.
Ooh,
while trying to avoid getting robbed by their neighbor, while also avoiding paying back the drug dealer for the pot that they smoked and now don't have the money for.
That sounds like a perfect movie.
Yeah. I mean, talk about universal themes, right? We can all relate. You know? All right, John, I got to ask you, though. This is the most important question I'm going to ask about Friday. In the pantheon of great bathroom-related scenes, where does this one rank for you? Because
that's got to be number one.
Yeah, I mean, it's either this or like Dumb and Dumber. That's the only two I can think of that are just excruciatingly long toilet scenes, but they're just so freaking funny, man.
How great is John Witherspoon in that movie?
No, he's incredible. He's incredible. I was going to say, if you had to pick one standout performance from the movie, would he be your pick, or who do you think really knocks it out of the park here?
Oh yeah, definitely John Witherspoon. His mannerisms are absolutely incredible in that movie. He for sure makes it. Every time I've seen him in something since then, or even when he had these little things, these little comedy skits that came out on YouTube for a while, and every time I still think of him from Friday. I can't stop thinking of him from Friday.
So I've been thinking about this. Brad and I don't watch a ton of sequels for the podcast usually, because it wouldn't make sense to start with Godfather 2 if you haven't done Godfather yet. But something about comedies, when you do a comedy correctly, it really is like catching lightning in a bottle. And I think when they try to do sequels to comedies, I don't know if it's that they overthink them too much, but there's always like diminishing returns. The Anchorman sequel kind of sucked. The Zoolander sequel was awful. You know, Friday was lucky enough to get 2 sequels made. And I actually think there's a lot of good stuff in both of them. But, you know, if you had to like evaluate the 2 sequels to Friday, what do you think about them compared to the first one?
Well, here's an interesting thing, and I think you're right on point. I've never seen either one of the 2 sequels.
Oh, wow.
It's almost like I don't want to ruin the masterpiece.
Right.
I totally get that, though. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know how else to say it. You would ruin the experience of the first one. I like, Brad, you know, one of my favorite comedies is Zoolander, and I still kick myself for even watching the second Zoolander movie. It's like unwatchably bad. And I know I've had the conversation with you before about the Hangover sequels. You know, the second one, they just tried to redo the first one. And then the third one was even more unwatchable than that. It's like we need to just leave it alone and accept that there was some alchemy going on, come up with a new idea instead of trying to, you know, catch lightning in a bottle twice.
Yeah, I mean, any good comedy, the premise, the whole premise of a comedy is that you're throwing characters into wild situations that people don't normally get into in their own lives. And so to try and repeat that over and over again just feels like that alone is a premise, like trying to repeat the crazy situation we got in the first time. It's just not going to work the second or third time. So yeah, it totally makes sense to me that when you look at comedic sequels, you're right. It's a case of diminishing returns for sure.
Isn't that a little bit like a single barrel, right? Like it's what we just talked about. You can follow all of the formula every time. But the reality of it is there's so many variables in there that it's not like you can take the same formula that worked in, I haven't seen the 2 sequels, but it's not like you can take the same formula that worked in Friday and repeat it and make, you know, whatever next Friday or Friday after next or whatever the sequel is, and have it be exactly the same. Sometimes it's just there's some art, there's some luck, and you hit a home run, and you don't always know exactly why it works and why it one's better than the other.
Look at you, man. Bringing it full circle. I love it, John.
Well, I was going to say, the more I learn about the movie industry, it really does feel similar to the whiskey industry in that there is a massive process that goes into the making of a film. We don't really watch the credits at the end of movies anymore, but if you actually sit down and watch them, there's, hundreds, if not thousands of people who work on these films. And so you're right. It's to try and recreate it when the whole crew might be different. You might have the same actors, but a different director, a different cinematographer, a different lighting crew. There's so much that could be different that you just never, you can't guarantee the same results.
In a different time in somebody's life, right? Is it the actor?
Yeah.
The people that are watching the film that they're going after, right? So the things that you like today aren't necessarily the same things that you like years from now. Your palate, your lifestyle, whatever. Whether it's the actors or the people watching the film, or the people that are making the whiskey, or the people that are drinking the whiskey.
Absolutely. Well, on that note, let's segue into what Smooth Ambler is doing now and what you guys have coming down the pike. We always try to leave a little bit of time at the end of these episodes for you to plug, upcoming releases. As you guys continue to evolve, I'm really excited to see what you guys are going to come out with. So is there anything you'd like our listeners to be aware of that's coming out of the distillery?
Here's what I like people to know, and here's something that I tell people all the time. We think that the best whiskey that heritage distilleries have ever made is in the past. We think the best whiskey that we've ever made is in the future. And we've never been more excited about the whiskey that we offer than we are today. Have we had 10 and 11-year-old Old Scouts in the past? Yes. But the whiskey that we make and the whiskey that we're blending, the Contradiction, is better today than it's ever been. And the stuff that we're better at making whiskey today than we were 3 years ago or 5 years ago. And so the whiskey that's coming out in the years to come is just going to increase in its quality. And we couldn't be more excited about that. The things that we just released, we released recently. We were late to the game, but we released a port finished Old Scout rye. That was really, really exciting.
Oh, man.
We released a little batch about a year and a half ago out of the tasting room. It was delicious. We did about 10 or 12 times as much of that and released that into the market last year. And then we've got a big batch of that coming probably late summer. And we think it's absolutely delicious. It's certainly become a favorite of the tasting room staff. And so we're excited about that. And we recently brought out Contradiction Rye to add one SKU in the Contradiction family. It's a blend of whiskey that we make and whiskey that we source. High proof whiskey, very soft and sweet and light and full of flavor. It's not a really in your face, bold, spicy rye. And so that's delicious. And then we just released our own homemade Founder. Everything that we make in house is called the Founders Cask Strength series. And we just released a 5-year-old cask strength rye. It's 88% rye, 12% malted barley. It was made with Larry Ebersold, who used to be at MGP, using an infusion style of cooking. So it's very, very bold. It's different than the Contradiction Rye. It's very bold, very in your face. And so we'll release more of all of those things in the next 6 months to a year. And then we'll add a bourbon in the Founders collection, Founders Cask Strength series, rather, in sometime this late spring. So lots and lots of stuff going on here. We had like 3 SKUs 18 months ago, and I think now we have 10. So there's a lot out there from us and a lot of different types of things.
That's awesome.
We understand that, again, everybody's palates are different. So we were really excited about trying to find something that everybody likes. There's something in our portfolio for every whiskey drinker.
Well, geez, John, when we asked you to share what's coming up, I was not expecting that. You guys are just barreling down the racetrack, aren't you?
We really are, and that's why it feels like such a sales pitch so much when you say, "Oh, we've never been more excited about the whiskey," but it's not. It just is. We have so many things that we've been working on for so long.
Yeah.
Like we said, it takes a long time to make whiskey, and then just a lot of them are finally, coming to fruition here. And so, it's really interesting to see all of those things go on there and really expand our portfolio. And we don't really think of ourselves as a distillery anymore. We really think of ourselves as a whiskey company, right? Since we do these kind of 3 different things, and so it's really opened up our portfolio and really given us more options to use out there in the in the market.
Man, well, John, it has been just an absolute pleasure to have you on. Thank you so much for joining us. We are huge fans of Smooth Ambler here at the Film and Whiskey Podcast, and we just can't wait to get our hands on everything that you guys are putting out.
Yeah, Film and Whiskey Nation, be on the lookout for this single barrel. We're going to be releasing this episode in conjunction with the Smooth Ambler Old Scout single barrel release. I cannot wait for it, Brad, to get it in an actual bottle and have it on my shelf, man. It's fantastic stuff. John, thank you once again for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. And we're always grateful to talk about what we do here and the whiskey that we make. We're certainly proud of both the whiskey and kind of our impact in the community. So thanks for having me on, and thanks for listening to us, and thanks for your support.
We'll be back on Monday with another regularly scheduled episode. But until then, I'm Bob Book.
I'm Brad G.
And we'll see you next time.